sound of scuffling echoed through the empty house, barely audible over the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. I paused, my heart racing, and glanced up at the attic door, which had been sealed since I moved in 6 months ago. It had seemed like just another mundane afternoon, but this noise sent a shiver down my spine. My name is Sarah, and I'm a 28-year-old graphic designer living in a small, older home in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. The house had charmed me with its vintage details and inviting porch, a perfect space to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. I'd always loved old houses, their histories woven into the very walls, but now I began to wonder if this house had secrets of its own. It was a Tuesday afternoon, November 14th, 2023, just past 3 o'clock. I had just returned from a long day at work. As I set my bag down on the kitchen counter, the faint scratching from above became more pronounced. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as the wind, or maybe just the house settling. But the sound persisted, a quiet but deliberate movement above me. I headed to the attic door, my curiosity piqued and apprehension creeping in. The door was old, its wood splintered and faded, but it had a sturdy lock. I twisted the knob, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Just as I was about to turn back, the sound stopped. A chill ran through me, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. That was the moment everything changed. The next few days passed uneventfully, aside from the occasional scuffle that I tried hard to ignore. I decided to focus on settling into my new life, but the attic nagged at my thoughts. After all, it was an old house. Maybe it was just the squirrels or raccoons that were common in the area. I had seen a few in the backyard, rummaging through the fallen leaves, yet my mind kept circling back to the noise. It was a nagging anxiety I couldn't shake off, especially when I realized I hadn't seen any signs of animals outside. My neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady with a penchant for gossip, stopped by to drop off some cookies on Friday evening. "Such a lovely home you've got here, dear. Just be careful of the attic. I remember when the Johnsons lived here. They always said it was haunted," she said with a knowing smile. I chuckled, brushing off her comment as just a bit of neighborhood lore, but her words lingered in my mind. Haunted? Surely that was just a story to scare children. Still, as I lay in bed that night, the memory of her words twisted in my thoughts and sleep eluded me. The following Saturday, I decided it was time to confront whatever was making the noise. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, I climbed the rickety stairs leading to the attic. My heart pounded as I reached the top, the air thick with dust and the smell of aged wood. The door stood ominously before me, a barrier between my normal life and whatever lay beyond. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The hinges squeaked in protest, and the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness like a knife. Dust motes danced in the light, and I squinted, trying to make out the shapes around me. Old furniture, boxes, and cobwebs greeted me, but there was no sign of life. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. Nothing, just the creaking of the house and the soft rustle of something shifting in the shadows. I stepped further inside, scanning the room. That's when I noticed a small, darkened corner that seemed out of place. Pushing aside some boxes, I stumbled upon a trapdoor, nearly hidden beneath the clutter. My heart raced as I knelt beside it. The latch was rusty, but gave way easily when I pulled. It creaked open, revealing a narrow space that descended into darkness. I hesitated, uncertainty flooding my mind. What if something was down there, but the curiosity was overwhelming? I descended slowly, the flashlight beam flickering as I moved down the narrow steps. The air grew cooler and mustier as I reached the bottom, and when I turned the flashlight's beam around, I found myself in a small, cramped space that felt more like a hidden room than part of the attic. That's when I saw it. A pile of clothes and a small sleeping bag tucked into the corner. The sight sent a jolt of realization through me. Someone had been living here, but why? I stumbled back, nearly dropping my flashlight. The noise I had heard, the strange feeling of being watched, all of it came rushing back. I had to get out of there. Climbing back up the steps, my mind raced with questions. Who was living in my attic? How long had they been there? And most importantly, what did they want? The next day, I called my friend Jake, a local journalist who had a knack for uncovering strange stories. "You won't believe what I found in my attic," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sounds like you've got a ghost on your hands," he joked, clearly not taking me seriously. "No, Jake, I'm serious. There's someone living in my attic. I found a sleeping bag and clothes," I said, the urgency filling my voice. Okay, let's check it out, he replied, his tone shifting to concern. When Jake arrived, I led him to the attic, my heart pounding with every step. I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on me, but when we reached the trapdoor, it was empty. No clothes, no sleeping bag, nothing. What happened? Jake asked, scanning the space. I swear it was here, I insisted, feeling the panic rise within me. Had I imagined the whole thing? But I knew I hadn't. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I locked all the doors and windows, trying to convince myself that I was safe. But just as I settled into bed, I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of shuffling from above. This time I reached for my phone and recorded the sounds. It was a small comfort, but I needed proof. The next morning, I decided to confront whatever was up there once and for all. Armed with my phone and a baseball bat, I ascended the attic stairs again. As I reached the top, the noise stopped abruptly. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I called out, "Whoever you are, you need to come out." Silence. Then, suddenly a loud crash echoed from the other side of the attic. I jumped back, adrenaline surging through me. I had to know what was happening. Gathering my courage, I approached the source of the noise. It was a large box that had tipped over, spilling its contents onto the floor. I knelt down, looking through the scattered items, old newspapers, faded photographs, and a small, dusty notebook. My hands trembled as I picked up the notebook. Flipping it open, I realized it was filled with names and dates, all crossed out methodically. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the pages, recognizing some names from local news reports. This was more than just someone living in my attic. This person was connected to something darker. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the edge of my vision, and I whipped around, heart racing. There, at the far end of the attic, stood a figure. It was a man, disheveled and wild-eyed. "Who are you?" I gasped, gripping the bat tightly. He didn't respond, but his expression was one of desperation and fear. "Please," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "You have to help me." My mind raced. Help him? Why? I didn't mean to intrude, I just needed a place to hide, he continued, his eyes darting nervously. "They're after me." "Who?" I asked, still keeping my distance. "Please, I can explain everything," he pleaded, stepping closer. I lowered the bat slightly but remained cautious. "Start talking." He took a shaky breath, and for the next few minutes, he told me a story that felt impossible, yet too real to dismiss. He had been living in the attic, hiding from a group involved in something illegal. He had stumbled upon their activities by accident and had been on the run ever since. "They know where I am," he said, panic rising in his voice. "I thought I could find a way out, but I can't go back out there. I just need a few days to figure this out." I could see the fear in his eyes, and a part of me wanted to believe him, but another part screamed for me to call the police. After a tense pause, I made a decision. "I'll help you, but you need to stay hidden. I'll get you food, but you have to promise me you won't go anywhere." He nodded, relief washing over his features. In the following days, I brought him food and supplies, trying to unravel the truth behind his story. I learned his name was Ethan, and he had been living in the shadows for far too long. As we talked more, I began to piece together the puzzle of his life, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just a random encounter. The names in the notebook were linked to a series of unsolved crimes in the area. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting pulled into something much larger than myself. One night, as I was bringing supplies to Ethan, I heard a noise outside. Peering through the window, I saw two men lurking near my front porch. My heart raced as I turned to Ethan. "They're here," I whispered, panic flooding my voice. I quickly ushered him back into the cramped space and quietly closed the trap door. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I crouched beside him, both of us holding our breath. The men moved around the house, whispering to each other. I could hear them clearly, discussing something about getting the target. It took everything in me not to scream. After what felt like an eternity, they finally left. We waited in silence, the tension thick in the air. "We have to go," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan shook his head. "If we leave, they'll follow us. We need a plan." We spent the next few hours strategizing. I couldn't believe how quickly my life had spiraled into chaos. This wasn't the peaceful home I had envisioned when I moved in. As dawn approached, we decided to make a break for it while it was still dark. I packed a bag with essentials, and Ethan gathered his few belongings. With every creak of the floorboards, I felt the weight of our decision. Finally, we slipped out of the attic and down the stairs, careful not to make a sound. The cold morning air hit us as we stepped outside, and I took one last look at the house that had become a prison of sorts. "Where to now?" I asked, glancing at Ethan. "We need to get to the police. They'll know how to handle this," he replied, determination in his voice. As we made our way down the street, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. We were free, but the danger was far from over. When we reached the police station, Ethan explained everything to the officers, and I stood by, a silent witness to the chaos that had unfolded. The officers took his statement seriously, and soon a detective was assigned to our case. But just as we thought we were safe, the feeling of dread returned. I glanced outside the station window and saw the same two men from my porch, watching us from a distance. "Ethan, look!" I pointed, panic rising in my chest. "Stay here," he said, and before I could protest, he rushed outside to confront them. I watched helplessly as the confrontation escalated. The men were aggressive, and before I knew it, chaos erupted. I could hear shouting, and my heart raced as I rushed outside, unsure of how to help. "Ethan!" I screamed, but it was too late. The men had grabbed him and were trying to pull him away. In a split-second decision, I lunged forward, swinging my bag at the nearest man. "Let him go!" The chaos continued, and I felt a surge of adrenaline as I fought to protect Ethan. But just as it seemed like we might be overwhelmed, the police officers poured out of the station, rushing to our aid. The men, realizing they were outnumbered, fled, and the officers quickly apprehended them. Ethan and I stood there, breathless and shaken, as the reality of what had just happened settled in. In the following days, the police investigated the men's connections to the crimes Ethan had revealed. They were part of a larger network, and with Ethan's information, several arrests were made. As for me, I learned to appreciate the safety of my home again, though I still felt haunted by the experience. Even now, I still think about that attic and the secrets it held. Sometimes I hear the faintest sounds from above, and I wonder if I'll ever truly be alone in my own home. As the days turned into weeks, life began to return to a semblance of normalcy. The police had assured me that the threat was neutralized, but a lingering unease settled in my bones. I remained vigilant, always checking the attic door, half expecting to hear the scuffling sounds again. Ethan had moved into a safe house provided by the police, where he would be protected while they built a case against the men who had threatened him. We kept in touch, and he often filled me in on the updates. The police had uncovered a network of illegal activities connected to the men who had been after him. Human trafficking, drug distribution, and other heinous crimes were part of their operations. It was a chilling revelation, knowing that something so sinister had been lurking in my quiet neighborhood. One rainy afternoon, I was working on a freelance project when my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "Can we meet? I have something important to tell you." My heart raced. I had been anxious about him ever since that confrontation outside the police station. I had hoped he would stay away from trouble, but the urgency in his message sent a chill down my spine. I quickly texted back, "Of course. When and where?" He suggested a small cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where we could talk without drawing attention. I arrived early, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be so important that he had to meet me in person? When Ethan walked in, he looked different, more worn, as if the weight of his past was still heavy on his shoulders. He waved and sat down across from me, his eyes darting around the cafe as if he were afraid someone might recognize him. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly, leaning in. I didn't want to risk talking over the phone. "Is everything okay?" I asked, concern etched on my face. He hesitated, taking a deep breath. "Not really. There's something I need to tell you, something I didn't share with the police." My heart sank. "What is it?" "I've been doing some digging of my own," he said, glancing around again. "I couldn't just sit back and wait for them to handle it." "What do you mean?" "There's more to this than just the men who threatened me. I found a name, someone who's pulling the strings behind all of this." "What? Who?" "His name is Victor Langley. He's the leader of the operation, and he's not just an ordinary criminal. He has connections everywhere. Law enforcement, businesses, you name it. He's untouchable." "Why didn't you tell the police?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I was afraid they might be compromised," he replied, urgency creeping into his voice. "I think he knows I'm alive, and if I go to the police with this information, it could put everyone at risk, including you." I swallowed hard, feeling the gravity of his words. "So, what do we do?" "We have to find a way to gather evidence against him. I've got a lead on where he's operating out of, but it's dangerous. I need your help." "Ethan, I don't know if I can..." Please, Sarah, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, he implored, his gaze intense. If we can get proof of what he's doing, we can bring him down once and for all. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: fear, determination, and a sense of responsibility. I had stumbled into a dark world I never wanted to be a part of, but here I was, standing at the precipice. Okay, I finally said, my voice steadying. What do you need me to do? Ethan explained the plan. He believed Langley was running his operations from a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. They had a few shipments coming in soon, and if we could get a look at what was inside, it could provide the evidence we needed. The problem is getting in without being seen, he said, his brow furrowed. I can't go in alone, and I can't risk being recognized. But you can blend in. You'll need to act like you belong there. I felt a twinge of fear, but also a rush of adrenaline. The thought of confronting a criminal mastermind was terrifying, but the idea of bringing him down was equally exhilarating. All right, I said, I'll do it. We set the plan in motion. Over the next few days, Ethan and I communicated through encrypted messages, discussing details without anyone else knowing. I researched the area around the warehouse and learned everything I could about Langley's operations. On the day of the operation, a storm rolled in, drenching the city in a downpour. The weather would provide some cover, but it also made me feel uneasy. I parked my car a few blocks away from the warehouse, my heart racing in anticipation. Ethan had arranged for me to meet him at a nearby diner before heading to the warehouse. As I entered, I spotted him in a booth, looking even more anxious than before. Are you ready? He asked, concern etched across his face. I think so, I replied, trying to calm my nerves. I have a set of walkie-talkies. Keep yours on you at all times. I'll be on the other side of the warehouse waiting for you to give me the signal. If anything goes wrong, just get out of there, he instructed, handing me one of the devices. Got it, I said, tucking it into my pocket. We finished our meals quickly, and soon we were making our way toward the warehouse. The rain poured down, creating a heavy mist that enveloped the area. As we approached the building, I felt a surge of adrenaline. Ethan pointed out a side entrance that appeared to be less guarded. That's your best bet. Get inside, and I'll keep watch from the outside. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. With a deep breath, I stepped toward the entrance. The door creaked open, and I slipped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The interior was dimly lit, and the smell of damp concrete filled the air. I quickly scanned my surroundings. There were crates stacked haphazardly against the walls, and the faint sound of voices echoed from somewhere deeper within the building. I knew I had to act quickly. I made my way through the shadows, carefully avoiding any areas that appeared to be monitored. My heart raced as I approached a cluster of crates at the back. I could see one of them was partially open, revealing what looked like bags filled with something. Drugs, perhaps? Just as I was about to peek inside, I heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through me, and I ducked behind a nearby crate, holding my breath. 2 men entered the area, speaking in low tones. The shipment should be ready by tonight, one of them said. Langley wants to make sure everything is set for the exchange. Yeah, but we need to be careful. There's been too much heat lately. If we get caught, it's over, the other replied. I strained to hear every word, my heart pounding in my ears. They were talking about the shipment. This was it. I needed to get evidence. As they moved closer, I took a chance and crept around the edge of the crates, hoping to get a better view. I reached for my phone, ready to snap pictures, but just as I was about to do so, the walkie-talkie buzzed in my pocket. Sarah, are you okay? Ethan's voice came through low and urgent. I froze, panic flooding my senses. The 2 men turned toward the sound, suspicion on their faces. Did you hear that? One of them asked, narrowing his eyes. I quickly pressed the button to respond. I'm fine, I whispered, trying to sound calm. I'm just about to. Suddenly, the men moved toward my hiding spot, and I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't risk being caught. I slipped away from the crates and headed toward the back exit, my heart racing as I ducked behind boxes and barrels, desperately trying to avoid detection. Did you see something? One of the men shouted, and I could hear their footsteps growing closer. I reached the back door. Thankfully, it was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, stepping outside into the rain. The sound of the downpour drowned out my footsteps as I hurried around the building, searching for a place to hide. Ethan's voice crackled through the walkie-talkie again. Sarah, are you there? I'm outside, I whispered urgently. They're on to me. Get to the right side of the building. I'll meet you there, he instructed. I sprinted around the warehouse, my pulse racing, as I moved through the rain-soaked darkness. I reached the corner just as Ethan appeared, soaked but determined. "What happened?" he asked, scanning the area. "I almost got caught. They were talking about a shipment. We need to get proof before they move it." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "We can't go back in there now. We need to get to the police and tell them everything." I hesitated, glancing back at the warehouse. "But what if they move the shipment before we can?" "We'll have to trust that what we have is enough for now," he said, urgency lacing his words. We hurried back toward my car, adrenaline coursing through our veins. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The next day, we met with the detective assigned to Ethan's case. He listened intently as we recounted our experience at the warehouse. "Langley is slippery, but if what you say is true, we might finally have something to pin on him," the detective said, his brow furrowing in concentration. "We'll need to conduct a raid, but we can't act too hastily. If he knows we're coming, he'll disappear." "Can't we move on the shipment immediately?" I asked, feeling a sense of urgency. "Not without solid evidence. We need to build a case that will stick," the detective replied. I felt frustration rising in my chest. People's lives are at stake. What if they're moving people, drugs, or worse? Ethan placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "The police know what they're doing, Sarah. We have to trust them." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as the police gathered intelligence on Langley's operation. They set up surveillance on the warehouse, monitoring every movement. Ethan and I remained in contact, and I often found myself pacing my apartment, anxious for updates. I felt like a ticking time bomb, waiting for the moment everything would explode. Then, one evening, I received a call from the detective. "We're ready to move," he said, his voice steady. "Meet us at the warehouse at midnight." A surge of adrenaline coursed through me. "I'll be there," I replied, my heart racing with anticipation. As the clock approached midnight, I arrived at the warehouse, my stomach in knots. The area was lit with police lights, casting eerie shadows against the building. I spotted Ethan standing off to the side, his expression a mix of determination and anxiety. "Are you ready?" he asked, glancing at the officers preparing for the raid. "I guess as ready as I'll ever be," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. The detective briefed the team, outlining the plan. "We're going to breach the warehouse from multiple points. Our goal is to secure the premises and arrest Victor Langley. We need to be quick and decisive, no risks." As the officers moved into position, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it, the moment we had been working toward. With a loud crash, the officers burst through the main entrance, shouting commands. I held my breath, hoping for the best while fearing the worst. The sounds of chaos erupted within the warehouse as officers moved in, securing the area. I could hear shouting, the sound of scuffling, and then, "Clear!" came a voice from inside. Ethan and I exchanged a glance, our hearts racing. "What's happening?" I whispered. "Hold on," he replied, his eyes glued to the entrance. Then, moments later, the detective emerged, a grim expression on his face. "We've got him," he said, relief washing over his features. "Victor Langley is in custody." Cheers erupted from the officers as they celebrated the successful operation. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was soon overshadowed by another feeling. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a message from Ethan. Instead, it was a notification from a local news app. Breaking, major drug operation disrupted, suspect in custody. And then, the headline caught my eye. Mysterious disappearances linked to warehouse operation. My heart sank. I read the article quickly, my stomach churning. The report detailed several missing persons cases that had been tied to Langley's operation. I had unwittingly stumbled into a much larger web of crime than I had realized. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Ethan asked, noticing my pale expression. I showed him the article, and his face hardened. "This is just the tip of the iceberg," he said quietly. "We need to keep digging." As the officers celebrated, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. I thought we had put an end to Langley's reign, but now it seemed like a new chapter was just beginning. In the days that followed, Ethan and I found ourselves entangled in a new investigation, one that would lead us down a path of secrecy, danger, and the uncovering of truths that would change everything we believed. We dove deeper into the network of crime that Langley had operated, uncovering more connections and potential victims. Each lead we followed brought us closer to the heart of the operation, and with every discovery, we realized the stakes were higher than we had ever imagined. One evening, as we sat in my living room going through files and documents, Ethan leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowing. "There's something I haven't told you," he said slowly. "What is it?" I asked, sensing the weight of his words. "I've been contacted by someone who claims to have information about Langley's operation. They want to meet, but I'm not sure if it's a trap." My heart raced at the thought. "Who is it? We can't take any chances." "It's someone from inside his organization. They're scared and they say they want out," he replied. "Do you trust them?" "I don't know, but if what they say is true, it could lead us to the missing people," he said, determination shining in his eyes. "Then we have to meet them," I said, feeling a rush of adrenaline. Ethan nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in his gaze. "We need to be careful. If this goes wrong..." "I know," I interrupted. "But we can't ignore this opportunity." We set a time and place to meet the informant, an abandoned cafe on the outskirts of town that had seen better days. As we entered, the atmosphere felt heavy, the air thick with tension. We chose a booth in the corner, our eyes scanning the room for any signs of trouble. "What if they don't show?" I asked, glancing at Ethan. "They will," he replied, though I could hear the doubt in his voice. Minutes ticked by, and just as I was beginning to feel restless, the door swung open. A figure stepped inside, drenched from the rain. They pulled the hood of their jacket down, revealing a young woman with wide, fearful eyes. "Are you Ethan?" she asked, urgency lacing her voice. He nodded, motioning for her to sit. "And you are?" "Lila," she replied, glancing around nervously. "I don't have much time. They're looking for me." "Why did you come to us?" I asked, my pulse racing. "Because I want out. I can help you find the missing people, but I need you to promise me protection," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan leaned forward, his expression serious. "What do you know?" "I was part of the operation. I worked in the warehouse, but I didn't know what was really going on until it was too late. I've seen things I can't forget," she said, her voice breaking. "Like what?" I pressed, feeling a sense of urgency. "People were taken, drugged, and shipped out. I thought it was just a smuggling operation, but it's much darker than that," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "Do you know where they are?" Ethan asked, desperation creeping into his tone. "Yes, I have names, locations, but I can't stay here long. They'll come for me if they find out I'm talking to you," she warned, glancing nervously at the door. "Can you write down what you know?" I urged, feeling the weight of the moment. Lila nodded, pulling out a small notepad from her pocket. She scribbled furiously, her hands trembling as she jotted down names and locations. "This is everything I know. You have to get this to the police," she said, sliding the notepad across the table. As she finished, I heard the door creak open again, and my heart sank. A group of men entered, their eyes scanning the cafe with predatory intensity. "Lila, we have to go," I said urgently, grabbing her arm. "Wait," she cried, looking back at the note she had written. "No time," Ethan insisted, pulling her toward the exit. We hurried out the back door, the rain pouring down as we ducked into an alleyway. My heart raced as we fled through the darkness, the sound of footsteps following behind us. "Keep moving," I urged, adrenaline propelling us forward. Just as we thought we had escaped, a voice shouted from behind us, "There they are!" "Run!" Ethan shouted, and we sprinted down the alley, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. We zigzagged through the streets, desperate to lose our pursuers. I felt like I was in a scene from a movie, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I pushed my body to keep going. Finally, we ducked into a small convenience store, the bell above the door jingling as we hurried inside. "Stay low," Ethan instructed, and we crouched behind a display of snacks, our hearts pounding in sync. Through the glass front, we could see the men searching the street, their faces twisted with anger. "Do you think they saw us?" Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Ethan replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. We waited in silence, the tension thick in the air. After what felt like an eternity, the men finally moved on, disappearing from view. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "We need to get out of here," he said, glancing around the store. Lila nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "I can't go back to my place. They'll find me." "Come with us," I suggested, my heart racing with the weight of our situation. "We'll figure this out together." Ethan looked at me, uncertainty flickering in his gaze. Are you sure about this? We can't leave her alone, I said firmly. With a heavy heart, we led Lila back to my apartment. As we entered, I locked the door behind us, feeling a sense of urgency settle in. Now what? Lila asked, her voice shaky. We need to get this information to the police, Ethan said, glancing at the notepad. But what if they're compromised? Lila asked, her eyes wide with fear. I'll take it to the detective myself, I said, determination swelling within me. If we can get the police on this, it might lead to saving those people. What if they come looking for Lila? Ethan asked, worry etched in his features. We'll figure it out, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. For now, we need to act fast. As I prepared to leave, Lila's voice stopped me. Wait, I need to tell you something before you go. What is it? I know where they're keeping the people. I've seen it, but you have to promise me that you'll be careful, she said, her eyes pleading. Tell me, Ethan urged, leaning closer. There's a warehouse on the outskirts of town, one that's been used for storage. It's not on any maps. That's where they take the people who go missing, she said, urgency lacing her words. Do you have a way to get there? I asked, feeling a surge of adrenaline. Yes, but it's dangerous. They have guards, and if we get caught... We won't get caught, I interrupted, my determination growing. We can't let fear control us. We have to act. Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. Let's do this. We quickly gathered supplies for the night. I grabbed a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a few snacks, while Ethan prepared his gear. Lila looked more frightened than ever, but I could see determination in her eyes as well. Are you ready? I asked her, feeling the weight of the moment. I have to be, she replied, her voice steady. As we stepped out into the night, the rain had finally subsided, leaving the streets slick and glistening. We moved through the shadows, our hearts pounding as we made our way toward the warehouse Lila had described. When we arrived, my stomach twisted with anxiety. The building loomed before us, dark and foreboding. Stay close, I whispered, glancing around for any signs of danger. We crept toward the entrance and Lila pointed to a side door. That's the way in. It should be unlocked. As we approached the door, I felt a wave of apprehension wash over me. Are you sure about this? I asked. Lila nodded, determination shining in her eyes. I'll go first. She pushed the door open and we slipped inside, the darkness enveloping us. I flicked on my flashlight, illuminating the dusty interior. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Let's stick together, Ethan said, his voice low. We moved cautiously through the building, our breaths echoing in the silence. As we ventured deeper, the atmosphere grew heavier, the sense of danger palpable. Then we heard it, a faint sound like muffled cries. My heart raced as we followed the noise, our footsteps echoing in the darkness. As we rounded a corner, we found ourselves in a large room filled with crates and boxes. In the far corner, we saw a group of people huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. Look, Lila gasped, pointing. But just as we moved closer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the building. We need to hide, Ethan urged, and we quickly ducked behind a stack of crates, our hearts pounding. I could hear voices approaching, and my stomach churned with fear. They're coming, I whispered urgently. We pressed ourselves against the crates, holding our breaths as the footsteps grew louder. A group of men entered the room, their faces hard and menacing. Check the perimeter, one of them commanded. We can't let anyone escape. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized how close we were to being caught. What do we do? I whispered to Ethan. We wait, he replied, his eyes scanning the room for an escape route. The men began searching the crates, their voices dripping with menace. If anyone's here, they'll regret it, one of them sneered. Just then, I noticed Lila's expression shift from fear to determination. I have an idea, she whispered, her eyes narrowing. What is it? Ethan asked. I can create a distraction. If I can draw them away, you two can get the people out, she said, her voice steady. No, Lila, it's too dangerous, I protested, panic rising in my chest. I have to do this, she insisted. I know how to get their attention. You can't let them catch you. But just trust me, she said, her gaze fierce. Before I could argue further, she slipped away from our hiding spot, moving quietly toward the entrance. Lila, no, I whispered. But it was too late. She stepped into the open, her voice ringing out in the silence. Hey, over here. The men turned, their expressions shifting from surprise to anger. "What the hell?" one of them shouted, and Lila took off running down a side corridor, drawing their attention away from us. Ethan and I exchanged a panicked glance. "We have to move now," he urged. We rushed toward the group of people huddled in the corner, their eyes wide with fear. "We're here to help," I said urgently. "Follow us." As we led them toward the exit, I could hear the men shouting in the distance, their anger echoing through the building. "Come on, hurry," Ethan urged, and we pushed through the door, sprinting into the night. We didn't stop until we reached the safety of the trees, our hearts racing as we caught our breath. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, glancing back to see if anyone was injured. "We're fine, just scared," one of the women said, her eyes wide with fear. "Where's Lila?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "She was right behind us," Ethan said, his voice laced with worry. We turned back toward the warehouse, but I could already feel the dread creeping in. "We can't go back," I said, my voice trembling. "We have to find her," Ethan insisted, determination shining in his eyes. "She helped us. We can't leave her." Just then, the sound of shouts echoed from the warehouse, and I felt my heart sink. "They're coming," I said, panic rising within me. "Quick, this way," Ethan urged, leading the group deeper into the trees. As we moved away from the chaos, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. We had saved some people, but Lila was still in danger. After what felt like hours of moving through the darkness, we finally stumbled upon a road. A passing car slowed, and I raised my hand, desperate for help. The driver rolled down the window, concern etched on his face. "What happened?" "Please, we need help. There are people in danger," I urged. "Get in," he said, and we piled into the car, relief washing over us as we sped away from the warehouse. As we drove toward safety, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. We had saved some, but Lila was still out there, alone and in danger. Once we arrived at the nearest police station, we rushed inside, and I quickly explained everything to the officers on duty. They listened intently, taking notes as I recounted our harrowing experience. "Do you have any information about the missing people?" one of the officers asked, glancing at the group we had rescued. "Yes, we do," I replied, my heart racing. "We need to go back. We need to find Lila." The officer nodded, urgency in his eyes. "We'll send a team back to the warehouse. You did well bringing these people here." As they prepared for the raid, I felt a mix of hope and dread. We had to find Lila. We couldn't leave her behind. It wasn't long before the police team was ready to move. I watched as they gathered their gear, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Are you sure you want to do this?" one of the officers asked me, concern etched on his face. "I can't leave her," I replied, my voice steady. Ethan stepped forward, determination shining in his eyes. "We're in this together." With that, the team set out toward the warehouse, and I felt a surge of adrenaline as we drove through the night. When we arrived, the scene was tense. Officers surrounded the building, ready to breach. My heart raced as I watched, praying that Lila would be okay. As they prepared to enter, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was the detective. "You did good work tonight. We'll do everything we can to find her," he said, his voice reassuring. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a mixture of hope and fear. With a loud crash, the officers burst through the main entrance, shouting commands as they moved inside. I held my breath, anxiety swirling in my chest. Moments later, the sounds of chaos erupted from within the building. Shouts, the sound of scuffling, and then, "Clear," came a voice from inside. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was soon overshadowed by anxiety. "Where's Lila?" I asked, my voice trembling. The detective stepped forward, his expression serious. "We're still searching. There's a lot of ground to cover." As the minutes turned into what felt like hours, I felt my heart sinking. What if they didn't find her? Then, just as I was about to give in to despair, I heard a shout from inside the building. "We found her!" I rushed forward, my heart racing as I followed the detective inside. As we entered the room, I saw Lila, disheveled but alive. Relief washed over me as I rushed to her side. "Lila!" She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I was so scared," she said, her voice trembling. "You're safe now," I said, wrapping my arms around her. The officers quickly moved in, checking her for injuries and ensuring she was okay. As I held her close, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. We had done it. We had found her. But as the excitement of the moment began to settle, I realized we were still in danger. Langley's operation was still out there, and we had to ensure his network was dismantled for good. In the days that followed, we worked closely with the police to gather evidence and build a case against Langley and his associates. Lila provided crucial information about the inner workings of the operation, and together we pieced together the puzzle of the missing people. As the investigation unfolded, we discovered that Langley had connections to higher-ups in law enforcement, making it difficult to bring him to justice. But we refused to give up. With each passing day, we grew closer, bonded by our shared experiences. Lila became like a sister to me, and together we sought to bring down the organization that had nearly destroyed our lives. One evening, as we sat in my living room reviewing documents, Lila looked up, determination shining in her eyes. "We need to go public with this," she said. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "If we can get the media involved, it could put pressure on the police to act. People need to know what's happening," she urged. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "You're right. If we can raise awareness, it might force their hand." I felt a surge of adrenaline at the thought. "Let's do it." The next day, we contacted a local news station, sharing our story and the evidence we had gathered. As the reporter listened, I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "This is a huge story," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "We need to get this on air immediately." Within hours, the news broke. Mysterious network of disappearances uncovered. Local woman speaks out. As the story gained traction, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. We were finally bringing attention to the issue, but I also knew it would put us in danger. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. The police finally acted, launching a raid on Langley's main operations center. We watched in awe as the news aired coverage of the events unfolding, but just as we thought we had turned the tide, a new threat emerged. I received a message late one night, a chilling text that sent shivers down my spine. "You should have kept your mouth shut." My heart raced as I showed it to Ethan and Lila. "What does this mean?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "It means we're not safe," Ethan said, his expression grim. "They know we're onto them." "We have to be careful," Lila added, her voice trembling. "They'll come for us." With every passing day, I felt the weight of fear settle in. I had thought we were making progress, but now it felt like we were being hunted. As the investigation continued, we remained in contact with the police, but the tension was palpable. I refused to let fear control me, but it was growing harder to ignore. One night, as I sat in my living room, I heard a noise outside. My heart raced as I peered through the window, but I saw nothing. "Sarah, are you okay?" Ethan asked, sensing my unease. "I thought I heard something," I replied, my voice shaking. He moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's probably nothing. We'll get through this." But deep down, I knew it was more than just paranoia. As the investigation continued, Langley's network began to crumble. Several arrests were made, and the pressure mounted on him. But he was still out there, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching us. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a loud bang outside. My heart raced as I rushed to the window, peering out into the darkness. That's when I saw him, Victor Langley, standing in the shadows watching my home. My breath caught in my throat as I backed away from the window, panic rising within me. "Ethan!" I shouted, rushing to find him. "What is it?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Langley is outside," I gasped, my heart racing. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed his phone and called the police. "Stay away from the windows," he instructed, his voice steady. As we waited for the police to arrive, I felt a mix of fear and determination. We had come too far to let him win now. When the police finally arrived, they searched the area but found no sign of Langley. My heart sank as they returned, shaking their heads. "He's gone," one of the officers said, concern etched on his face. The feeling of dread settled back in as I realized that Langley was still out there, a threat lurking in the shadows. In the following days, we remained on high alert. The police increased their presence around my home, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As the investigation continued, more evidence emerged against Langley and his associates. We had finally connected the dots, and it felt like we were getting closer to bringing him down once and for all. But just as we thought we were making progress, a new threat emerged. I received another chilling message. "You can't hide forever." My heart raced as I showed it to Ethan and Lila. "What does this mean?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "It means we need to stay vigilant," Ethan said, his expression serious. Lila nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "We can't let our guard down." As the investigation continued, I felt like we were living in a nightmare. Langley was still out there, watching us from the shadows. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a noise outside. My heart raced as I got up to investigate, peering through the window. That's when I saw him again, Langley standing in the street, watching my house. I backed away from the window, panic flooding my senses. "Ethan!" I shouted, rushing to find him. "What is it?"